Good day, everybody. My name is Captain Martin LaFerrière-Simard. I'm the Formation Europe social worker, and we're here today to talk about culture shock. Culture shock is a common term used to describe a feeling of anxiety and disorientation that a person can experience as he or she passes from one culture to another. The majority of people who are posted from Canada to Europe experience a culture shock, and it is useful to recognize and understand that this is a period that will eventually pass, that there are actions that can help, and that there are extremely useful and positive that can come out of it. Culture shock is a cycle. At a certain point in time, you may get out of the honeymoon period and realize that things are not going as smoothly as you thought. With time and tools, you will adapt and get better. There is, in fact, 5 stages. The first stage is the incubation phase stage. Is the time where you will have euphoric feelings. We also call that period honeymoon stage, where everything encountered is new and exciting. The second stage, at that stage, the person may encounter some difficult times and crises in daily life. Maybe feelings of discontent, impatience, anger, sadness, and feelings of incompetence, marital stress, family tension and conflict. That happens when a person is trying to adapt to a new culture that is very different or different from the culture of origin. Transition is a difficult process and takes time to complete. There can be strong feelings of dissatisfaction. Essentially, this stage is characterized by a crisis. If you overcome it, you stay, and if not, you leave before you reach a nervous breakdown. But a vast majority overcome it. That second stage often begins with a hostile and aggressive attitude towards the host country. You may feel like they don't care or don't want to understand the difficulties or problems you face. In fact, they have likely completed the process of accepting to live with the challenges. As they are there since a while, they understand why there are X or Y challenges. The second stage is often more difficult for the dependents than the military member, as the member day-to-day activities through work might not differ too much from what they are accustomed to, where the dependents must maneuver in a totally different environment from which they are used to. The anxiety experienced in that stage, that stage results from losing all familiar signs and symbols of social interaction, when to shake hands, what to say when we meet people, when and how we give tips, when to accept and when to refuse an invitation, when to take a statement seriously or not. Frustration comes when we move into a strange culture. All or most of the familiar cues are removed. Like a fish out of water, a series of props has been removed from under us. It becomes frustrating, and the reaction is very similar from one person to another. We tend to reject the environment which causes the discomfort. And that's why we experience sometimes some sort of regression. Home suddenly assumes a tremendous importance. Everything becomes irrationally glorified. You only remember the good things. You forget about difficulties and challenges experienced in Canada. And then the fourth stage comes. That stage is characterized by gaining some understanding of the new culture. Living in both cultures gets easier as things in the new culture become familiar. People learn some of the language and are able to participate actively in the adapted society. The individual is more familiar with the environment and wants to belong. He or she may not feel as lost and starts to have a feeling of direction. And people who integrate can often give very good support to others who are affected by culture shock based on their own experience. This stage often initiates an evaluation of the old ways versus those of the new. The crisis lessons as getting a better understanding of the language and as moving around more independently. You still live some difficulties, but your attitude towards it is more like, this is my cross to bear right now. Instead of criticizing, you may make jokes about the situation, the environment, the people, and even about yourself. You start recognizing the poor devil beside you who is worse off than yourself and who you can help. In the fourth stage, the person realizes that the new culture has good and bad things to offer. It can be one of double integration or triple integration depending on the number of cultures that the person has to process. The integration is accompanied by a more solid feeling of belonging, and the person starts to define him or herself and establish goals for living. You accept the customs of the country as just another way of living. There is no more anxiety, but there may still be moments of strain, which only completely leaves with a full grasp of all cues for social interactions. With this complete grasp, you not only accept the food, drinks, customs of the new country, you start to enjoy them. Think of some challenges you have faced living in Europe. It is likely these challenges are also shared by others. Let's look at some of the common challenges. People think that they won't be impacted by a culture shock, but they forget tons of factors. They wake up and realize that they are not going well without understanding what happened. That's why it is useful to list some of the common stressors that Canadians experience in Europe. And don't forget, those stressors exist in addition to your previous individual and family stressors. So my point is, it's okay to feel distress if it ever happened. So for example, there's some here, but a posting in Europe, the first thing that has to be said is that a posting in Europe is not 3 or 4 years of holidays. There's unfortunately more time spent at work than traveling, and balancing travels with day-to-day life is challenging sometimes. Shopping, opening hours, grocery stores, phone, internet services are completely different from what we know in Canada. The weather, depending on where you are in Europe, could be very different. Petty crimes in some locations are more important than in some others. And significant time difference with Canada, which has an impact on several aspects of your life while you are in Europe. Another example is the medical services provided by the Capt in Europe are very limited, and there are language barriers and differences in practice with local medical and psychological services. Cost of living in Europe is high, and there's a different banking system, and most of the time couples or families face some loss of income. And on the top of it, for Capt members or for people that work into a NATO environment, discovering that there's so many languages and different working methods and standards, and even sometimes different ethics, work ethics, is challenging. You as a Capt member are most of the time one of one, in your trade, and you may feel some isolation. We, meaning the Capt, as a whole will see the member in Europe as one representing Canada, and that comes with high expectations. Job opportunities as well for family members are limited or non-existent. The situation may be particularly hard on kids who are still in the process of knowing who they are and how they fit in their social circle. So arm yourself with patience and understanding. In their minds, it may be the end of their social life and the beginning of 3 or 4 years for very long years. It's crucial for them to talk regularly about what is going on in their life. And with a posting to Europe, there is the added pressures of stress, of culture shock, and language barrier. So children will face challenges both academically and socially. And unfortunately, schools do not have specialized services for behavioral or learning difficulties in Europe. Well, there is, but not available for Canadians most of the time in the schools that we go to. The support of the extended family and friends is limited in many cases, and the risk of isolation is high. As soon as there's something changing in your life or there's exceptions to the daily routine, you'll see that you're now out of your family or friend support network. There's no ideal formula, and families with young children or families with teenagers or single people or couples will experience different things and their own challenges, and will find their way to be more comfortable after a while. Marital issues experienced in Europe have become even more difficult than it is in Canada. Most of the time, the one that you can talk to is your husband or your wife, because you may be one out of one family in a certain area. So it's unfortunate when the one available to talk to you is the one that is getting on your nerves. So context of how can require marital adjustment. So I ask you to monitor yourself and to be more aware of your feelings, behavior, and negative thoughts. In relation to culture shock, what you see here is the mental health continuum model, and you have like green, yellow, orange, and red. Red being the worst situation, and green the best situation, where you see mood, you see behavior, you see social interactions as well that are changing through the continuum from the left to the right. So in relation to culture shock, you may feel angry, uncomfortable, confused, frustrated, or irritable, and you may lose your sense of humor. You develop negative feelings about the people and culture of the host country. You're bored or fatigued and unable to concentrate or work effectively. You can eat and drink compulsively or need an excessive amount of sleep. You withdraw and spend excessive amount of time alone, only with Canadians or other foreigners, and avoid contact with the local people. You understood that those indicators are those indicating a crisis phase, crisis stage, as described in the second stage of culture shock. So I would like to know what are your coping strategies. There are many things you can do to facilitate your adaptation in Europe. And what you have to have in mind in the crisis stage is, do I use the proper coping strategies? Do I need to add new coping strategies in order to better deal with my current mental health state? So here are some tips for you. First of all, try to stay open-minded. Accepting the new culture is one of the main steps to feel at home in the host country. Learning the rules of living in your host country is important. Some people have a way of viewing their culture as both the best and the only way of doing things. If you criticize my country, you are criticizing me. If you criticize me, you criticize my country. So along with that kind of attitude comes a tendency of attributing all individual particularities to national characteristics. Then you place rush judgment and potentially close yourself off to others. Understanding the ways of the new culture is essential, but it does not mean you have to give up your own. You develop two patterns of behavior which you adapt with the context. Try new things instead of trying to reproduce your usual environment. Try new flavors, learn the language, get to places of local cultural. Do something that reminds you of home. If, for example, you listen to your favorite music or you practice a familiar hobby, that can boost your spirits when you are feeling homesick. Try to find a hobby. Go where the locals or a NATO community go and take a course. Whatever activity you choose, grow your social network and don't isolate yourself. Learn the language. Language is the biggest barrier to to the new culture. With language comes greater understanding and therefore more opportunities to understand the culture. Break the language barrier with your baker, the postal worker, or fruit and vegetable salesperson. They generally appreciate the efforts made in the foreign language, and this may give you great personal satisfaction and a sense of being better integrated. Find pleasure in little things. Instead of focusing on major differences between your country and your host country, try to notice the little details that make your destination unique. For example, going to the market, the local market. Take care of yourself, eat well, exercise, and take the time to sleep, specifically when you are into the crisis stage. Be aware of your attitude. Limit your alcohol consumption to moderate amounts. Take the time to be aware of your general attitude. If you have a negative or aggressive attitude, not only will this be heavy on your own shoulders, but it might create a negative response from others, which then creates a vicious cycle. So once you understand your own part in the difficulty of adapting to the new culture, then you can do something about it. The key point is communicate, communicate, and communicate with your spouse, with your children, with friends or colleagues that are going through a tough time. For our children, in order to facilitate their transition, provide them with positive encouragement, tendency to think they are the only one. They have that tendency to think that they are the only one in this situation, and when they realize there are other children going through the same thing, it makes them more comfortable in their surroundings. Remind them that they are not alone, not the only one starting in a new school, and point out the positive, like the new friends they will make and new interesting things they will learn. Prepare them for new situations. You can do some role play. Role play are very good ways to have them practice some of their social skills they will need. They need reassurance and understanding. They may feel that no one understands how they feel. Let them know that you understand or are trying to. If they feel understood and heard, that will encourage them to come to you for future problems. Reassure them that they can help. They can always come to you for any problems. Your patience and understanding will help alleviate some of the anxiety. If possible, extracurricular activities are helpful. It helps to meet new friends and feel settled in a new environment. It gets them out of the house and meet people with similar interests. If they were practicing certain activities in Canada, encourage them to continue in Europe, even if it's not in the same language, and that will give them a sense of continuity and stability amongst all the challenges. Also, have them talk about their day. For example, ask 3 things they disliked about their day and 3 things they liked the most. It helps to vent and help them to remember good and positive things about their day. If you don't ask specific question about their day, they may answer something like very generic, and you won't get enough to let them talk. So ask specific things compared to generic questions. Be aware of any important changes in their attitude. If they become too quiet or too loud, have them talk about what is going on. If they have a very negative attitude towards school or wants to completely avoid school, maybe they are being bullied, encourage them to talk to you about it. It's okay that kids will experience an adjustment period, but some warning signs are very important to remember. Discipline problems, noticeable drop in grades, physical health problems, maybe early signs that can lead to serious problems. So consider seeking professional help for your child if you see that coming. Resources in Europe are limited, but some are available. Check with your medical clinic if you are a Capt member, and check with your insurance company, with the MFS social worker, and or with local providers if you are a family member. Resources available in Europe are on this slide. If you have any questions regarding this presentation or any questions regarding an adjustment period of time or some question about your mental health state in Europe, please contact me. I'll be happy to discuss any kind of issue about adapting in Europe or about your mental health, either if you're a Capt member or a family member. These are my contact information. This ends the presentation. Thank you.